right, the first thing I need is I want to get a level check. Can you tell me your name and the group you're with?
My name is Alekos Zambrano, and I'm with Raices in Tampa.
All right, excellent. Our listeners will want to know about the event that you're having on Friday. What is it? Where, when, and why are you holding it?
Well, it's called Tampa Stands with Ferguson, solidarity with the people of Ferguson and Mike Brown. We're having it at Curtis Hickson Park at 6 p.m. this Friday. Give people who work a chance to show up. And we're basically having it because, in response to the grand jury trial decision, there's been similar protests all around the nation. So we want to stand in solidarity with those who've been putting themselves on the line in all cities across America, not just Ferguson. But also there was a response in Tampa about a week ago, and what we saw were a lot of small, isolated actions. And even though the group I'm in is an immigrant rights group, at a time like this, sort of like a moment in this nation's history, everyone needs to come together. Everyone needs to make one big event and all be in the same place at once, unified. I think that's what brought success to other cities that had hundreds of people showing solidarity, shutting streets down, and so hopefully we can get that going in Tampa.
Excuse me a second, I have to cough. Sorry. You mentioned a big protest, a big demonstration. I think some of our listeners will remember a few years ago, Curtis Hickson Park, that's the site of some of the largest Occupy Tampa demonstrations. So is that part of the reason that you're picking this central downtown Tampa location, is to get a big crowd?
Well, yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is Tampa as a city for protesting doesn't have any go-to spots or very many central locations. I wasn't a part of Occupy Tampa, but I was a part of the organizing that happened after the Zimmerman verdict when he was declared innocent. And we also had a rally as a response to that, and it was also at Curtis Hickson Park. That was only about 2 years ago, I believe, and there was almost close to 400 people showed up. It's a big park.
But what might people expect if they go there? Is it going to be, you mentioned shutting streets down. Are you planning civil disobedience, or what kind of rally will this be?
We're definitely not planning civil disobedience at this point. And I can only speak for myself as a representative for, a wide, broad group of organizers from different organizations from St. Pete, Tampa, and even Lakeland. But it seems like there's going to be a lot of people showing up. We're definitely going to be holding signs. There's definitely going to be a great list of speakers, which I think is the part I'm excited for. And if the time comes, we probably will march down the street. Yeah.
Down the sidewalk or down the center of the street?
Well, if there's a lot of people, we have to use the street. Yeah.
Every time we've been covering this story, of course, for months, and lately, ever since the grand jury returned its decision, I get calls every time I play a story, and people say things like, "How come you're focusing on this story still?" Or why are you focusing on the race part of it? You mentioned they'll criticize us for mentioning that that the victim was black and that the policeman was white. Are those things that should be mentioned when we talk about this story?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think what they're asking is, why are you focusing on one part of the story and not the other? And that can go both ways, because why did the trial focus on whether or not Darren Wilson felt fear for his life? Why didn't the trial focus on what Darren Wilson was doing, harassing people in the street by himself to begin with? They adjudicated, that trial on the street. They left the body out there for hours. The prosecutor already knew he didn't want to prosecute Darren Wilson before he started. So we can ask, why aren't we focusing on those parts of the stories? But really, there is a bigger picture here, and it's way bigger than Ferguson and Michael Brown.
A bigger picture in what way?
Well, just like another tie back to the Zimmerman case, why did they focus on whether or not Trayvon Martin was on top of Zimmerman at the time he got shot? Why wasn't the trial about why George Zimmerman was stalking a young boy through the streets at night?
And earlier you talked about you used the term trial when you're talking about the grand jury decision, right. Because I've heard, I think the reason you may have done that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that some people are saying, calling it like a trial because so much evidence was presented, and there was a testimony by the police officer and so forth. So it resembled a trial, even though it was a grand jury making a decision rather than a jury coming out with a trial verdict. And so what I want to ask you is why, since there was this evidence presented at this grand jury, and they came to a particular conclusion, what is it that you don't trust about their decision?
Well, in much the same way that, so when Trayvon was murdered, the police showed up and cleaned up the crime scene. They didn't even make it a crime scene. So there wasn't even evidence there to make it a fair trial. In the same way that this prosecutor for Darren Wilson already knew he didn't want to indict Darren Wilson, we see these trials, grand juries, justice system, what have you, as, in my eyes, being illegitimate. And when I say trial, what I'm really talking about is the value of black and brown lives, because I believe that's what's on trial every time we have these little showcases and showdowns in the media.
And finally, if people want to find out more about your rally on Friday, is there someplace they can go?
Yes, on Facebook is where we have most of our traffic, so they can look for Raices in Tampa. That's RAICESEN Tampa. They can find the event through there. They can look through Tampa Dream Defenders Facebook page, Think SDS, Friends of Human Rights, SNCC. There's different groups that are kind of blasting it out there.
All right, thanks so much for your time today.
No problem.